show. Actually, I have to tell you something. Today, I have a good news and a bad news. The good news is that Antoine is not there. Oh no, sorry, that was the bad news. Antoine is not there due to the fact that he became father again. Luckily, the first time he got a boy. So from this position where we are here right now, we congratulate him. Unfortunately, we can't have the show together. So guys, you have to talk to me today, just alone. Hopefully, it will be okay for you. So let's start with our topic today, right?
Hey,
Uh,
hey,
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 what happened? What happened? What
come
happened?
on. So you're trying to make all of that without me? That's mean of you, Björn.
Is it? First of
Just
all,
because I have the coolest T-shirt on earth doesn't allow you to just
exactly.
do that show alone.
Yeah, my mother will say that as well. Anyway, from the Water Show team, congrats Antoine for your son, which was delivered, I think, 3 days ago, right?
Yeah, that happened Sunday morning. So we have now a third member in the family,
Yeah,
and I mean a
congrats.
fifth member in the family, technically speaking. I cannot say my daughters anymore. I have to say my kids now. So
But the good thing is they will take care about your boy. So congrats from the entire Water Show team. So that means you will stay here with us.
yeah, I will spend that show with you,
Okay.
and maybe we'll have to explain at some point why you have a fancy background. But that comes someone in the future. I just warn
Okay.
all of you, it might happen that at some point I need to jump out. I'm with my two daughters here at home, so they might need my help for something like popcorns are no longer in the box or something like that. So that can happen. And that being said, I think we can kick off, right?
Let's go.
Ready? Have a good show.
You too.
So, I'll have the pleasure to make the introduction for today and actually to bring you that topic. I mean, you've seen it in the title of that episode, you've seen it right now on the top of the stream. What is this one problem with industrial wastewater management? Actually, if you look at the projections, the word projections, the UN projections, and you look at the water use in the future, let's say by 2030, we have a problem because if we continue doing what we are currently doing, we will be missing 40% of the world's water by 2030. And the problem with that is that it's hard to tell to people stop drinking, and it's hard to say to people stop eating. So those ends of the water industry won't be that much affected. We will have to reduce, but it won't be the hurt of it. So where do you cut your water when you're missing water? And that is industry. And that is something which is not so abstract in the future. If you look at what happened in Taiwan, for instance, last year, where semiconductor plants had to be shut down because there was no water anymore for them, that is exactly what will happen more and more in the future. And if you have countries like Estonia, who uses 97% of their water on industry, well, they will be at some point in trouble because that means the whole GDP of the country is in jeopardy. But every challenge comes with opportunities. And if water goes scarce, that means as well that we have a good chance to rethink the industrial water management, to rethink the industrial wastewater management, and maybe to go towards circular economy and sustainable resources. And that's what we'll be discussing in depth today. But right before, I think, Björn, we have a partner for today, right?
Actually, we have. Actually, I'm in the holy halls here of the DAHAMIA. If you never have heard about DAHAMIA, don't worry. What you definitely have heard about is the AKEMA. AKEMA is the leading trade show for the process industry. So that means once in a year or every second year, there will be this show. And this year, that will be from 22nd to 22nd August, because last year, due to COVID, and you know all the story, we will have this show again here live in Frankfurt, and the DEHIMA is the organizer, or let's say the holder of this, of this exhibition. And they expect, just to give you some numbers, they expect 150,000 people from around 150 countries. That's a lot. If you want to do the comparison, this is the same size as IFAD, for instance. So you're sometimes familiar, but that is just one piece what DAHAMIA is doing, because the other part is they are also an expert network for water management as well. They are a non-profit organization. So that means what they do is what their services. They do kind of consulting, they do strategy development, they do deployment, they do R&D, they do conferences, they do workshops, they do a lot of stuff. So if you're really looking for a partner if you're from the industry, from the water side, and you're looking for a partner, go here, Frankfurt, ring the bell. Definitely, they will help you. So I have been attended a couple of seminars, conferences, and it was always worse. So that's our partner today. Thank you, DAHAMIA, for having us today. Normally, Antoine should be here as well next to me, but this place is not empty, but I will come to this later.
Oh, that was a major spoiler. Now I'm looking forward to understand who's next to you, but I think that's coming in a second because actually we would like to be very concrete. So far, I was a bit, up in the air saying there's going to be missing water, but I think Björn, you have an example of a place in the world where right now there's some water missing for industry, and which is pretty well known by everyone, right?
Do you know Tesla, Antoine? Have you heard about Tesla?
I think I heard a couple of things about that guy running it.
The CEO is Elon Musk. Maybe you have heard about them. You know, if you remember, Antoine, 2 weeks ago, what was the topic of our show? World Water Day, right? So we talked
Right?
about World Water Day. Exactly at this day, Tesla opened the Gig Fab in Berlin. Obviously, it's not Berlin, it's Brandenburg, but nobody cares, right? So they opened the Gigafab in Berlin to produce their cars, which is in principle amazing. But they did this at the World Water Day. Why did they do this at the World Water Day? Well, the issue is they still are fighting with with the legal court about the water, because the point is the factory is in a region where, honestly speaking, where we don't have any groundwater anymore. I mean, I explained that Germany is lacking, over the last 2 decades, same amount of groundwater as the Bodensee has, right? So it's a huge amount. That was because of the NASA program. They figured that out. So that means, and in one of the region, which is Brandenburg, which is next to Berlin, they have a very soil ground. So the soil ground, we all know that from our study, can't really get the water. So that's one thing. The other thing is that it rains there, around 500. I have the number here. What is the number? It is around 3 times less as, for instance, somewhere in the regions of the Alps. So anyway, the point is they don't have any water, but they got a contract, for 3.3 million cubic meter a year. So the contract was signed by Tesla with the government, but they did this without the permission of the people. Hey, come on, we are in Germany. We need a permission for everything. So right now they're using 1.4 million, which is somehow like, a small city with 30,000 people equivalent. So that is the amount they use.
1.4 million cubic meters, just to understand that, right?
1.4 million cubic meter water. That is
Per
what they
year.
need per year, correct, from the groundwater. And the issue, as I said, right, they don't have any real, any water anymore. And so they have this big fab, which takes a lot of water. And actually, they are still fighting a little bit from the legal point of view. But anyway, it is producing right now. And he opened exactly due to the fact that, I mean, we know all Elon Musk a little bit. He's a guy, if he has an issue, he plays the issue at the day where we celebrate, or let's say where we want to talk about water issues, and he opened his fab exactly at World Water Day. So, but this brings us to the point, right? So he
That's
needs
typically what the bad guy in James Bond movie would be doing. I mean, so he's Doctor
yeah.
No, but okay.
So you are saying that he's a bad guy, right?
In
You
that
said
to
this.
that extent,
So your career with Tesla is over right now.
not at all. I'm not saying. I mean, I think let's face it. Let's say, okay, everybody in Europe wanted to have that factory, and I think Elon Musk played a bit with that because he knew that all the countries would be wanting to have that gigafactory, I
Yeah,
guess.
absolutely.
And there are good reasons to place that one in Berlin, but for sure that water management is an issue. I don't know if it's related, but there's this German, half American company called EAWD, which is doing atmospheric water generation and which is right now putting into service an atmospheric water generation plant. Next to that plant, you know how Tesla works. So I guess they're not allowed to say that that plant is for Tesla. But when you look at the amount of water they will be producing there, it's roughly 3 times
Mhm.
this throughput you're mentioning of 1.4 million cubic meters, because it's 10,000 cubic meters per day. So if I do the quick maths, 10,000 times 365 must be around this 3 times more than what you mentioned. So it sounds like we're at the point where we're doing industrial water out of atmospheric water. And I think that is a pretty interesting point in time, because that indicates the value of water and industrial water right now. And this high value of water opens new avenues, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, one solution could be, I know that, for instance, Florida is doing this. That means what we can, or let's say other way around. The industry, what is the industry using the water for? What is the major part, which is for cooling, right? So same with Tesla. Same needs this kind of amount, the most of this amount for cooling water. So what we could do is, I mean, we have all the wastewater next to. Why not taking the treated wastewater, bring it, bring this to the industry, and the industry is taking this, treating this in the way they need it, and then be using this for cooling water, for instance. As I said, Florida, the county of Florida is doing this. That means 45% of their wastewater is reused, and they use it for irrigation, for car wash, for these kind of things. Why can we not do similar things here with our industry?
Let's come back to your gigafactory in Berlin. I think the way it's set up today is they buy water at a certain price and a certain tariff from the municipality,
Definitely, yeah.
and they pay again a certain price and a certain tariff at the outlet of that factory for the wastewater treatment. So basically, they pay at the entry and they pay at the exit. But I mean, money doesn't cover for the fact that water might be missing. So you're right, it sounds like an obvious move to close that loop, assuming that closing the loop doesn't cost so much more than how much it costs at the entry plus how much it costs at the outlet. And now we're mentioning Tesla, but let's be a bit more general and let's zoom out a bit. That is something which is very famous in China. China realized in not this 5-year plan they're in, but the previous one and the one before, that they had a problem with industrial water pollution on one end, and the amount of abstractions. Because you've mentioned cooling, the
Yeah.
typical one is energy. As soon as you're
Yeah.
in an energy power plant, I mean a thermic power plant, it's just you're heating water, and that's just pouring your entire grid. So if you're placing your energy plant in a place which is missing water, you have a problem. And China realized that it wasn't a question of ecology or even being green minded. It was a question of survival for this industry and for the people around. And so they were very proactive, and they actually closed factory, or they told to some other factories, it's very simple. Option one, you don't use any water, which means you have to close the loop and to reuse everything. Option two, you move. And that is quite a strong driver to push for this wastewater reuse, closing the loop, and treating the water closer to where it's needed.
Yeah, furthermore, I mean, think about the wastewater treatment plants. Most of the wastewater treatment plants we have, they are designed decades ago. So what they do right now is they don't have the load anymore. They don't have the load anymore. So that means it could be part, or let's say, if they would bring that, if they would be part of the cycle for the industry, they could bring value. They could bring value. I mean, why not? I mean, you know that I'm pretty blunt. Why not saying to every industry? I mean, if you need 1 million of groundwater, you are just allowed to take half of that, and the other half you need to take from the municipality. It is treated wastewater. Why is that? Why is that so an issue? And then to mix it.
Okay, so now you're saying that the industry should bring it back from the treated municipality,
Yeah, they should take it. They should take it, and they should mix it with the process water, with the groundwater they already use.
which means you.
If it comes to the cooling, if it is just for cooling, I mean, you need just. We all know that. I mean, you need to disinfect that. It runs over the RO system, and then it goes to the cooling center.
Okay, but then you have an obvious problem. I mean, our networks are designed in a certain way so that water flows to the wastewater treatment plant. So now if you want that water to come back from the wastewater treatment plant, there's one thing which speaks against you, which is called gravity. So that means you have to pump your water back, which means you have to lay down a network. And come on, I'm working for GF piping systems. So believe me, I love that option where you're laying down kilometers of pipes and you pump your water back with pressure pipe into your factory. It just
Okay,
sounds to me like
okay.
not the most clever
Then,
use
then,
of
then,
money.
then other way around. Then other way around. Why not forcing the industry to keep all the wastewater they produce? So I mean, right now we have around
That's more interesting.
10,000 wastewater industrial wastewater treatment plants, and around 20 to 30
Wait.
percent they
10,000 where?
in Germany
In
only.
Germany. Okay.
We have 10,000 places here in Germany from the industrial perspective. So why not forcing them? Because I think 20 to 30% they are discharging directly to the river, so they have the allowance, right? So why not forcing them, saying, okay, you are not allowed to do that anymore. You have to keep the water. Either you recycle to the end, or you give it to the municipalities.
The interesting aspect with that is that it gives us a good idea of what we're discussing here because you're mentioning 10,000 wastewater treatment plants in Germany. I mean,
Only
Germany
that.
is a big country, but not that big, which
Yeah,
means
but
then
let's say from the European perspective, they have the most industrial wastewater treatment plants.
exactly, and that's my point. It's that means those industrial wastewater treatment plants have to be pretty small. It's not like something which is millions of population equivalent. It's rather smaller, and it's a size where it sounds appealing to new business models because right now they would just be, as you said, discharging to the river. So there's a typical treatment, but it's a cost to be in business, or they pre-treat it for the municipal factory. But
Mhm.
now imagine that you would say that plant is no longer called a wastewater treatment plant, it's called a water resource factory. I mean, that's pure marketing, so that's your field. But what we're saying here is that the exact same plant is now no longer just a tax for keep doing what you've always done. It's also an opportunity to produce water because we've been mentioning water quite a lot so far, but also other compounds. Think of, I mean, resource recovery, but think also of energy.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking, I mean, if we are saying that the wastewater treatment plants, they are somehow, let's say, they have too less water, too less wastewater due to the fact that we are not producing anymore from the people perspective, they could get more. Right now, I mean, it is crazy. Think about. I mean, I talked about that. I think episode 3 a year ago. I talked about Berlin, which is 3.5 million in population. So that means they treat 550,000 cubic meters. 20 years back, this was double this amount. So, but the network is still the same. So, man, they have to flush the network with, with drinking water to make sure that they don't clog, that they don't get rusty, and all these things. If we could bring all the wastewater back, if the industry is not able to recycle that, we should could bring it back, and the municipalities would have more wastewater to
Okay,
treat.
let's not reopen that debate because basically you're saying we have a legacy and we have to deal with that legacy by doing something stupid, but just because we have a legacy. Maybe it's about time to clean the legacy. But I mean, I won that argument 1 year ago, so we're not restarting with that.
Like,
And you're
come
going
on,
to
no, no,
say
no,
you
no, no,
won.
no, 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 no. Don't get me wrong, but it could be a solution. Let's say get away from the perspective that the industry is allowed to discharge into the rivers. I mean, we are coming to the point where where is the PFAS coming from? The PFAS is coming from the industry. And the portable water treatment plants, they have to make sure that they treat PFAS to make sure that we don't get it, even if we have it right now in our blood. Right now, but the source is the industry. So why are we not saying, okay, we stop that? Nobody's anymore allowed to bring it to the rivers. They have either to recycle 100% or they bring it to the wastewater treatment plants.
Because that's a nonsense. And that's what we discussed 1 year ago. That's a
No, no,
nonsense
no,
because
no. A
what you're
year
calling.
ago, we discussed something different. There we
No,
discussed whether it is centralized or decentralized, which is
yeah.
a better
And
way.
it's exactly what you're bringing back because when you're treating that inside the factory, you are treating a macro pollutant. There's something which is in high concentration in limited amount of water, which means you can size your full treatment train to that specific pollutant at the intensity that is at that specific place. Whereas if you collect all that water and you mix it with, who knows, rainwater, municipal sewer, and everything, and you bring it to a big plant, then what you have to do is actually build a giga treatment to still treat the same amount of pollution, but inside a much wider amount of water, which is just stupid. And in between, you'll have to pump that water around to
Yeah,
let
but
it flow.
who's paying, Antoine? Who's paying for the treatment of the PFAS? It's you and me. But where's the source? Where's the source coming from? It's the industry.
Yes, I mean, that we need to treat it, there I agree. I'm just saying we should treat it where it's produced. And actually,
Exactly.
you mentioned PFAS, but PFAS would be something which is more looked at right now in North America for good and bad reasons. Now, let's not open that door, because if we open that door, we need one more hour. In Europe, we have something, in Germany, in Switzerland, we're looking at micropollutants. And most of the times, those micropollutants, exactly the same story than what you said about PFAS. At the very beginning, it's just a simple local production. I will not give names because probably I'm not allowed, but one of the micropollutants in Switzerland is one of the oh, it's hard without giving names, but it's one thing you would put on your skin, okay? And you could be doing that and then bathing, and then it would be in the water. And the
Mhm.
other option is you would have the factory inside Switzerland, which is producing that exact same product. And if you got the outlet of that factory and you treat it at the outlet of that factory, you solve 99% of the problem. So what I'm saying is that it's just a nonsense to do it everywhere in the municipal side when you could be doing locally in the industrial side. Now, let's not just point at industrials without discussing solutions. So I would try to discuss now with our industrial viewer or all the people which are active in the industry and tell them what could be the solutions for them and how could they actually better the solution regarding water, regarding resources, regarding energy. And I think that's something, because I mentioned something which is happening in North America, but not in Europe. And there's another thing right now which is happening in North America and not in Europe, and to a certain extent in Asia. And it's wastewater as a service, or water
Ah,
treatment as a service, or all the
again,
shades of
again.
something AAS. And I know you have a strong opinion on that, and you're going to disagree with me by saying that that's not a solution.
No, I'm not saying that you're wrong or that you're right. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of, let's say, let's call it intention from the industry to do this, but they don't realize it in the end. 3 years ago, I was exactly at this place at the DAHAMIA. There was Industrial Water Days, and on stage there were two companies. One was Envirochemie, which is an EPC in Germany, and the other company was Merck from Darmstadt, which is a pharma company, right? So, and these company purchased a wastewater treatment plant from Envirochemie to treat whatever their wastewater. And on stage, the guy from Merck said, "Hey, why did you sold us the entire plant, and why did you not sold us like the Rolls-Royce model, just the water?" It was an open question. All I'm saying is, since that time, nothing has happened. Think about that. I'm back to the Tesla. Tesla is very innovative in principle, right? But even they decided, hey, we want to have our own plants, our own people. We want to handle this in our way. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying it doesn't work here for Europe, or let's say the industry is not ready to implement this idea. The
Okay,
question
first,
is why?
let's wipe out the Tesla argument, because we're talking of the company that bought a big Toyota, a former factory in the US, when they had no chance of filling that factory and saying we need to be proprietary of whatever we do. So okay, that's in their blood,
Again,
that's in
you,
their
you,
DNA,
you
that's
crush
what they
your
do.
chances to work one day at Tesla. Okay, but I'm good with that.
No, I'm just saying that's what they do.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
if
Good.
that's what they do, it's logical that they do the same with water, which is honestly not as important for them than it is for the production lines and all of that. I'm not blaming them. There's arguments to say that that might be interesting or not. So I'm not even debating that. What I'm saying is that let's forget the Tesla example. You're saying you don't see that. Actually, um,
Yeah,
I've been discussing with Stephen Delet, which is the CEO of Inopsys, and Inopsys is a Belgium company, and they are based in Belgium. Now they have even a subsidiary in Switzerland. And what they're doing is basically wastewater treatment as a service. And they are based in
there
Europe,
are other
and they have
companies
references
that
in
do this as
Europe, and
well.
that is happening in the industry.
Yeah, but there are companies who do this. Avides, for instance, from the Netherlands is doing this. I mean, look at
Okay,
Veolia with their mobile fleet, what
okay.
they do, right? I mean, there are
So companies
companies
are
who,
doing this.
who
So it's not
wants
happening,
to who
but it's
wants to
happening.
jump into that field, but so far, let's say an entire plant, I haven't really seen that someone else is, operating this as water as a service. I don't see that
Open your
really.
eyes.
And well, I do, but the point is, it always comes to one point. We all know that, and the industry knows this as well, the end user, that, let's say, water as a service is more expensive,
No,
as if, in the end, yes, if they
no,
would, purchase the entire plant. That's one
no.
argument. But the other is, even if you're here in Europe, you have regulations, and in the end user is chargeable for the production, for the limits, to reach, to not to overcome the limits, and so on and so on. So he's in charge, and that's why he doesn't want to give this to someone else. That's why, for whatever reason, we don't see that really here, this kind of business model. I know it exists. It is a good thing, but
Okay,
we don't see it at the moment.
let me zoom out once more because I think you're saying things which are not quite right. So,
Okay.
if we zoom out, industry is not one big bucket with everybody in the same bucket. You have power industry, you have chemical industry, petrochemical industry, whatever. Let's zoom back in on two specific industries: all the petrochemical industry and all the chemical and processing industry, so CPI. Those two industries, to them, do you know what the wastewater treatment standard is most of the time?
Tell me.
You take your wastewater, you put it in a truck, you pay for the truck, and you forget about it because the truck deals for it. And what does the truck do? The truck takes that wastewater to an incinerator and he's burning that wastewater. And trust me, I've tried. Burning water is pretty difficult. So that is very, very, very inefficient. And in turn, that is very, very, very expensive. But the point where you're right is the industry has a good advantage of doing that is whenever they do that, they pay someone to deal with something, which means it's no longer their liability. That thing is
Exactly.
gone, that thing is trucked
Exactly.
away, and that thing is far away from them, which means that actually having their own plant and operating their own plant might or might not, but might be cheaper, maybe. But if they
But
were doing it themselves, they would still have the liability. And so this water as a service is a nice in between because you're still paying a company to deal with it, but that company is operating on premise. So that means they are somewhere on your ground, but whatever they do is their liability and not yours as an industrial. And it still costs less than that trucking away on top of being much more sustainable.
yeah, but there are two more aspects. Is, I mean, you have to think about, first of all, about the, let's say, the idea is, it works for, let's say, for short-term period. If you have maintenance for a longer time, if you have a brownfield project, for instance, or if you have an accident and for a period of time you need to treat this water in a different way. And the other aspect is,
I
it
don't see
costs
why
it,
it would only
it, it
work for the
costs
short term.
it costs a lot for the EPC contractor. So don't underestimate that.
It's
We know all that the EPC has a high, revenue, but a very low margin. And to offer this kind of service, they have to pre-finance everything.
okay.
That's the tricky part here.
What's universal in water? What
So
are the parts of the water industry which are universal?
what do you mean? I don't get it.
I mean, if you look at the water industry as a pyramid or as as a tower or whatever, we have
Yeah,
the supplier on the bottom, the OEM, the integrator, the EPC, the general contractor, the
true,
consultant, the end
true.
user, and the satellite, which would be finance. And actually, there are two parts of that full pyramid which are universal. It's the technology part and it's the finance part. And
Exactly.
what you're saying is that it might be difficult to finance all of that. And you're fully right. Or
Oh, come on! You never had a project like this. So find a partner who is financing that.
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying you're right, or you were right until recently. Because
Until
if you've watched the
recently.
news, and I know that you've been watching the news, there's this ESG investment wave of
Mm,
investment funds saying, I want my money to do good, right? So far, you
mhm.
agree with me. Now,
Yep.
these guys, what they're missing is the right story and the right opportunity. And I do believe that if you tell them your money is going to be put into work by investing into an on premise treatment of wastewater, which allows you to recycle that wastewater, no longer use groundwater or whatever source of of water, on top of which you don't have to burn water anymore, I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure you're going to find people which are really, really craving for that solution.
True. I mean, it's a kind of
Always.
it is a is a kind of circular economy approach. Is that?
It sounds like, to
It
me at
sounds
least.
like. So then let's take this as a bridge, because
Mhm.
I already said this, right? I mean, maybe I get tired to talk to you, but I have another guest next to me. This is just this way. And I'll let him ask the question. Well, let's see. First of all, let's introduce him. Thomas Track. He's the head of water management here at, where's this, DAHAMIA. And first of all, welcome to the show, Thomas. Good to have you here.
Right, Björn, thank you very much. And first of all, Antoine, to you. Well, congrats to the birth of your son. Oh, that's a really important thing. And looking for the future for our kids, that's in fact why we are working on water. Well, and Björn, you asked about circular economy and
What
water.
is circular? I mean, it is somehow everywhere. But what does it really mean? Circular economy for the water, for, let's say, for the water industry, and in particular for the wastewater industry.
So when we look at circular economy as a whole, so then we have this economic system of closed loops, where we have raw materials, compounds, like things like mobile phones and stuff like that, that are produced, used, dismantled, and the components or the product as such being put back again into the value chain. And that, if possible, at the highest degree of value. Now the question is, of course, where comes water in? And many of these processes don't work without water. If we, for example, look at the chemical industry, so what we have heard there, quite prominent over the last month and years, is like kind of plastics recycling, chemical recycling of plastics. And you can imagine, if you work in this field, this doesn't work without water. Or if we take, let's say, the solid earth materials and stuff like that. So everywhere where we have these processes of dismantling, separation, cleaning, and so on, we here and there always need water with it. So we see water at the end somehow as an enabler when we look at circular economy, but also when we look at industrial production as such. That helps us to keep industry, process industry and production running, and to keep, if we look at Germany or every other country, to keep those countries in their micro and macro economy alive and to keep their economical strengths.
I mean, the idea is a little bit, in principle, we have a linear concept so far. So that means someone needs some water. He's getting the water from the ground, and he is using the water. He's processing the water. He's producing wastewater, and in the end, he is treating the wastewater by discharging or bringing it to the municipality. And we need this kind of circular concept. And that's what I said in the beginning. We need this treated wastewater and bring it back, because I mean, think about that. For instance, I said this, why not bringing all the wastewater from the industry back to the municipalities? For instance, we could create energy. So that means part of that could be the mix of the energy we need in future. Wouldn't that be the case? So that if we would bring everything really to the wastewater, let's say to the municipalities, that we create more energy out of that?
Well, in principle, the approach that you and also you and Antoine discussed of bringing industrial used water back to the municipalities, it's an interesting one. But the specific thing that we see in industries and process industries is, so other than the municipal sector, so industrial production is highly specific. That also means the wastewaters that we generate are highly specific. And from the industrial perspective, we always need to see, we have the production at the heart and at the focus of our aims. And of course, this production has to be embedded in sustainable responsibility for our environment and everything around.
True.
It means ecologically, societal, but also this has to be done in an economical way. And that means we have opportunities where we can create symbiosis between industry and municipalities. But most often these symbiosis things go the other way around. So that means the cycle runs a little bit the other way around.
Exactly what I said. So we take the pre-treated wastewater and bring it back to the industry, right?
That's a thing that is quite
I mean,
important.
Antoine said it's ridiculous, but I'm pretty sure that there are examples. I heard about Dauternoisen.
Yeah, so the guys, well, Dauternoisen, this is one of the examples. So these are the guys being at the North Sea coast. And let's put a small spot on the water situation there. So we are in a coastal region. We have the sea with the salty water there. And we have inland, so we have the fresh, sweet groundwater. And of course, if you look around the globe, we have industry, municipalities, and also agricultural use quite often concentrated in coastal areas. If you look at the globe, then you find very often these situations. You will find that in Spain, you find that in the Netherlands, in Germany. Also, if you look to, for example, Asia, you have this situation. So that means our freshwater resources are very, very highly valuable. And of course, we need to use them for the highest priority use, like, for example, drinking water. So that means also for industry, we have to find solutions that we have water resources available that on the one hand side do not affect the environment, but on the other hand side allow us to have water resources in a sufficient amount and appropriate quality. And this is where then the circularity approach, for example, alternative water resources like treated municipal wastewater come into the game.
During our last show, during the World Water Day show, we had an idea. It came from the audience, and I think I formulated that a little bit. I mean, we have these kind of CO2 certificates.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that make sense, let's say, to have a similar concept for the industry? Let's call it wastewater certificates. Wouldn't that work? That they reduce, the load, they reduce the discharge, that they reduce entire there, or let's say that they go more in deep about thinking about the entire circular economy approach. Wouldn't that work? Is that the idea?
Well,
I like the idea.
Well, Björn, it's an interesting idea. And
have you heard that, Antoine?
In fact, even so, well, we have several concepts that take up this idea a little bit. So on the one hand side, it's the water footprint approach, but on the other hand side, it's also, let's say, the stewardship approaches, the water stewardship approaches, where we have really a kind of a sustainable and responsible use of water resources. And when we think that into depth and implement it, then we also see about what water resources do we use? Where does our water come from? And what efforts do we use to treat our water? And this is where we get into this direct relation to the energy thing, the carbon, the water energy nexus, because when we think about treating and reusing water, we also have to think about CO2 emissions. And when we look at the industrial water use, nowadays in Germany and also at the European level, we have this European Green Deal where we say, well, we want to be carbon neutral by 2050. And then we are getting in a classical, let's say, target conflict. On the one hand side, reducing CO2 emissions. On the other hand side, being more water efficient. And being more water efficient, you mentioned either you or Antoine, reverse osmosis and things. That means we need to treat water, and this requires energy. As long as the energy resources are not green, this will result in CO2 emissions. So this is really interesting point where we need to come forward, where we need to find integrated solutions that also make use of potential, at least elements of the circularity thing, like making use of a quite high quality traded municipal wastewater in the coastal regions that already has quite a good quality, and to make use of that for industry. For example, we have a case in Germany at the delta of the River Weser.
Somewhere in the north, for all of you which are not familiar with German landscapes.
It's at the North Sea coast, where the local, let's say, the municipal water supply and wastewater treatment company also provides treated and upgraded wastewater. In fact, it's no longer wastewater. It's a raw water for industrial purpose to protect the water resources that we have as kind of sweet water resources, because they have the water stress due to the different water needs. And so industry is the one that can, in this case, for example, very well make use of treated and upgraded wastewater.
But I mean, Antoine, give me one more question. I mean, we are just two guys who are talking once in a month about this topic, but you are the real experts. Where is the industry right now? How is the status quo right now in terms of circular economy with our industry here in Europe right now?
So when thinking back to the discussions yet some minutes ago, I must say they are already quite advanced.
Okay.
So we really have very, very nice and good examples. So what we see is we already have circularity approaches in a very narrow circle, Anton, that fosters the arguments that you gave. So if you can recycle or reuse water, or let's say product phase in water very close to the production, that's definitely an asset as benefit. Mm-hmm. We had some years ago a project with a chemical company in the personal care product sector, where they were at the production plant reusing their high quality cleaning water. Mm-hmm. So they reused it, they separated from this used cleaning water for the process plant, okay, the product phase. And what they made was they had two advantages. On the one hand side, they were able to keep, there we are in the circular approach, on a very high quality level, their cleaning water for the process. Mm-hmm. But secondly, they have been able to find a business case for the residue product phase. Of course, you are not longer able to use it for human purposes, so no worries, you won't use any kind of reused materials like this for taking a shower. But if you go with your car to the car wash, yeah, then you will find these products as part of the car wash. Yeah. And this is a very nice example for this circularity approach. But we can also think that a little bit bigger in broader circles. But there it's also try to treat your waters as close to the sources as you can, where you have, let's say, the freight water relation as optimum as possible to get those substances that you don't want to have in your water out of it, and to have an opportunity to create a business case out of these substances. It's difficult enough, but this is the way forward, and industry is already on the track. You've mentioned Dow. We've seen the OVV. We also see that, for example, in Spain, the Tarragona region, where you have all the big chemical industry companies. This is also where we have already the reuse of municipal wastewater, and also other examples around the globe.
So, I just wanted to come back to what you said some minutes ago about the energy part of it. You're mentioning that in a carbon neutral world, there will be a problem. Maybe there will be some decisions to make between treating through reverse osmosis and all of that stuff, which is energy intensive, and trying to save the water. There's one element which I wanted to ask you, because we are discussing if it makes sense to reuse the municipal wastewater, which is treated inside the industrial park. Let's assume they're not just neighbors, in which case it might be an obvious choice. But if they're not neighbors, right now, I guess 90% of the energy in a water system is used for pumping around the network. So to that extent, additional reverse osmosis wouldn't be that intensive compared to how much water you would have to pump around to bring back the treated municipal water back to the industrial park. So doesn't that speak again for on-site reuse rather than centralized reuse?
Well, Antoine, that's an interesting point. And of course, we have to be clear, you always have an optimum between how far can your municipal wastewater resource be located from the final point of use, and where does more or less the reuse inside the site make sense. And in fact, we have both. At the end of the day, we have situations where, let's say, municipalities are quite far away from your production site, where over the years, let's say, the infrastructure, the maintenance of all this pipe network is too expensive to have a really also economically efficient water reuse in this way. Then, of course, the focus is getting more on the industrial side as such. But we also see nowadays other opportunities. We mentioned earlier somewhere also alternative resources. Well, municipal wastewater is an alternative resource.
It's a resource in general.
It's a resource in general. We also see that industry is thinking about other approaches, and not only industry. And this is, for example, rainwater harvesting. This is exactly something that
big topic.
The Neusen side from Dow is also looking at this. So in this region, we have in wintertime, we have a surplus of rainwater that only partly feeds into groundwater, but quite a part of it goes into the sea. And so they're also thinking about possibilities of, let's say, artificial groundwater recharge that can be used for, let's say, storing water in water-rich periods than for water-scarce periods. And artificial groundwater recharge, this is also something that is actually under development, under research, partly also already implemented here in Germany. And this is, besides the reuse of municipal wastewater for industry, also an interesting aspect of treating municipal wastewater to have a quality available for groundwater recharge that then can be used for various applications, being it industry or being it agriculture, for example.
Is there anything else, Antoine? Otherwise, I would like to bring something in. I mean, we have, I think, since a couple of years, we changed we had a new novel of the sludge treatment here in Germany, right? So that means for all which are not aware about that. So from 2029 on, all the big municipalities are not able to discharge any longer the sludge. They have to find alternatives, right? So in principle, what we have seen here right now is mono incineration. This is the major part where the sludge goes to. And from 2029 on, all municipalities over 100,000, I think, equivalent has to do this, and a couple of years later, the others as well. Is that, I mean, or let's say other way around, the other countries are a little bit smiling about this approach, because we are here in Germany, we are the only one, right? If I look into Austria, if I look into Switzerland, they all don't care. They all don't care about what we do with our sludge. From your perspective, from the industry perspective, it also affects the industry, because BASF, for instance, they're producing 400,000 tons a year in terms of sludge. So if others laugh about it, is that right or is it wrong from your perspective? It's a very toxic topic. I know that, but from your perspective, from the industry perspective, what is your point of view of that?
Well, from the perspective that I can see from the moment, it's a valuable approach, and be sure industry wouldn't do that if it would not create, on the one side, a business case or being supportive to be legally compliant. And when we look at the sludge incineration, so we have the issues of recovering phosphorus.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And we all know that phosphorus is quite important and basic.
Yep.
We don't have phosphorus in Germany. Also,
we import 70,000 tons a year.
Also in Europe. On the other hand side, it's also we create energy with the sludge incineration. Mm-hmm. And this is also an important issue, and an important point, like trying to keep also energy in the loop, or the energy content of, let's say, mass fluxes in the system. It's also part of the circular economy system.
I'm asking from this perspective. Years ago, Switzerland started with the micropollutants, right? They came up and said, "Hey, we have the solution." Not sure whether you know this, Antoine, but they had ozone and activated carbon, and they
if you could stop sidetracking, that would be great.
They were the forerunner. The question I have is, could Germa be the forerunner in terms of sludge treatment for entire Europe with that approach? Because all others right now are pretty silent.
Okay, I'm just watching the clock. I give you 1 minute to answer that sidetrack from Björn. Then we close the sidetrack, and I'm coming with questions from the chat.
Okay.
Well, fast answer: yes, we could be, because we have this as a kind of for example, with the phosphorus as a route, where we are dependent from import of materials and stuff, and think, unfortunately, nowadays we see what problems it can pose if we have no exit strategies or alternative routes for raw materials, energies, or whatever. So from the strategic point of view, also to keep, let's say, Germany and Europe from the industrial perspective as valuable and competitive and attractive production sites, it's definitely a good way and route forward.
Okay. Antoine, what do you have in the chat?
Well, let me start with...
Because we can't see that here.
Okay, let me start with something very subjective. Of course, the chat agrees that I'm right, no surprise. Okay, it's not me. So the
I mean,
chat
you are the
says,
one who can push the button, so
of
that's why
course.
all the
But I
other
didn't
ones.
find anyone saying that you are right. So, no. But jokes aside, I have very serious questions from the chat. Actually, there was a very long one, which I'm going to synthesize a bit, which is saying that when we talk of industrial wastewater and industrial water management, there's something which is the regulations, and the regulations can be very different from one place to another. He's mentioning how in the US you can have very different regulations from one state to another, and I think that applies also to countries in Asia or to country in Europe. Have you seen industries? We've mentioned Tesla in the beginning, but maybe there are other examples like picking the place they're going to put their factories just because the water regulations might be a bit more flexible in one place than in the other. He's giving the example of Arizona, which is much more permissive compared to California.
Well, from my perspective, I want to give you the answer, but from my perspective, we are all somehow under the European Union, right? So they give somehow the legislation. You can make it a little bit more stricter in the countries, but let's say you have at least a limit here in Europe, so then you can just choose a little bit which country you go to. But I think there are other more important things industry is considering. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, Björn, you're right. So what we see is, well, I'm not having in detail overview of the US, but when we look for Europe and also to the Asian countries, then this is quite well regulated. For example, take China. So we have industry parks in China and nearly all over China where we have by legislation, they are requiring zero liquid discharge, independent of the ecological and economical efficiency of that in terms of CO2 emissions and whatever. So they're just requiring zero liquid discharge by law. And what we see is, for example, from my perspective, I'm very much into the chemical industry. We have all the big chemical companies there because they can produce close to the market. And having a clever integrated industrial water management system that allows them to produce there, because they can optimize, even under a ZLD approach, their water costs and make the best out of these. So coming back to this question, water availability is an issue, yes. That's one of the real assets of Germany as a still quite water-rich country. But most of the companies, they have company-wide, let's say, requirements for water management, like, as I said, the stewardship approach that is rolled out company-wide, no matter in which country those companies are producing.
What I read, for instance, if I'm going back to Tesla, the two arguments why Tesla came over to Berlin are, the first thing is they want to put a stamp into the automotive industry because Germany is the automotive industry country.
No,
And
it's
the second, come on. And the second is the funding. And this was more important. I mean, Germany has the most stricted regulations in terms of wastewater discharge in entire Europe. So that was not the reason why they came over. There was funding and, that they want to stamp, let's say, they put their foot on the ground of the automotive country.
Okay, I'll take that as an answer, even if you're wrong about the German part. There's one question which, again, I'm going to extend. The question is from Matthew, which is plugging his company, but I guess that's a fair plug. He's mentioning that SQO, so supercritical water oxidation, done by companies like Aquater Technologies, so that's for the plug. Is it an option for clean industrial wastewater and or sludge treatment / management?
Oh, yeah.
I would
Definitely.
just extend the question to bring a bit back that element of treatment as a service we mentioned. And if we're talking of new technologies like SQO, which are still quite compact in size, it's a kind of thing which you could imagine plugging into one or a couple of containers, and that would open possibilities as on-site or on-premise treatment, but many further promising prospects like producing energy and all of that. So I'm not trying to influence your answer. I'm just raising the question in that sense. Do you see opportunities for new entrants, new technologies, and new business models in that industrial water and wastewater management scene?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can do. Well, what we see from the industrial perspective, of course, it has to be a business case. But when we go on site, what we see there, we quite often have, or nearly in every site, we have limitations on site. So that's space availability. So that means if we have solutions, high efficient solutions that we can put on site, let's say in a containerized modular way at those places where we have the space available. This is for sure a big advantage. And if we have at the same time these technologies that allow us to also treat micropollutants, or let's say trace amounts of compounds that we want to avoid in the water. So in Europe, we are going for the zero pollution action plan where the things come in. Well, then yes, those technologies, they have for sure a window of opportunity to be implemented. Björn, what do you think?
I go the opposite direction, because what we see right now, I mean, Squoze is a perfect solution for sludge treatment. It is 4 times more cheaper, for instance, and in producing energy. It is, in terms of space, in terms of phosphorus removal. You can do a lot of things with this kind of technology. But if I'm back to the example with the sludge treatment, 99% of all the sludge will be treated in future because of the novellation by mono incineration. Even if this technology is available, it looks like there's a hard fight due to the fact that we already using mono incineration over the last years. So that means the utilities, they are somehow, they know this, how that works, right? They track it there, and then they can handle that. They don't know Squoze. Squoze is a cool technology, but for sludge treatment, it's hard to enter the market for them. And that's why I was asking, is that maybe can Germany be a role model for entire Europe in terms of what can we do with the sludge? And then Squoze definitely plays a bigger role. But it looks like for the moment, I mean, there are some aspects, but let's say the majority of the market, I think, will go definitely for mono incineration, unfortunately.
Okay.
Well, for Germany, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think there might be opportunities. Well, for Squoze, it's special in other countries. But in general, let's say for innovations to enter the market, I think it's true. We'll have to see that they can be placed on site. So that's what we've seen in the past. Good ideas, good technologies. But when it comes to really putting them on site in existing and running systems, because we don't have so many industry parks or plants being set up. We don't always have a situation like BASF in China setting up a new site where you can also design and plan a competitive wastewater treatment system. And this is really an issue independent for which purpose. You have to have the flexibility. This has to be with quite a low amount of space you need to have those things really also for a retrofit of existing sites and plants.
I just want to jump back on your, it's difficult to find the scale effect and to have something which is competitive, because that's something I strongly disagree with. But we have 3 minutes left, so that would be a big sidetrack to open for the remaining 3 minutes. So I'm just going to synthesize that very shortly by saying that new technologies, all the shades of those new technologies, be it digitization, remote operating, and all of that, are opening new doors in terms of scale effects and scalability of processes very close to where it's produced. So even the industrial park could still be too big, and you could go a bit closer to where it's produced. But I said it's totally unfair, because I'm not even letting you time to answer my objection. Just to round it off with the chat, we have very, very, very interesting comments which go a bit on the border. We have this question of the economical feasibility of direct wastewater reuse for potable uses after highly advanced treatments, and how they could be brought to scale in Europe and in different municipalities all around the world. I'll not let you answer to that, because I'm going to say, have a look to the next shows we have in the pipe, because I guess that's a question we might
we have
be
some
answering.
more, right? We have some more.
I think that's one where we might be answering in 2 months.
Maybe we should have a weekly one. So many questions to ask.
Yeah, and then there's another one which is really across the border, but I think is very interesting. What about stormwater harvesting technologies to utilize it for drinking water and bringing it to scale, instead of the water being wasted and discharged to the ocean with so many concrete-lined engineered storm drain channels and very limited land left?
All about the money. It's all about the money.
Yeah, but
somehow
stormwater management is also something which is opening doors. And I guess, really sticking to our topic, I guess an industrial park also has water falling on it. And that is somehow a risk he has to manage, which he can turn into an opportunity. Is it something which you've seen, or am I really across the border here?
No, fully agree, Antoine. So that's also something that industry is taking care about. Dealing with stormwater, and that goes a little bit in the direction of what I mentioned with DAO, with the winter harvest of water and the summer use. And when we look to the municipal sector, so the concept of the sponge city. So this is something that tries to make use of this thing, make use of the excess water that you have in stormwater events and things like that. But in the end, it all goes for integrated approaches. Look at the interfaces where you can make use of water resources in different parts, being it rainwater, being it municipal wastewater, being the opportunity to recharge aquifers with treated water to make it available for further use, and also look at the sites in different scales from the production process to the plant, to the site, to the neighboring environment, the municipals and all the things where you could create synergies and interactions for your water use and the technologies that you use to really come to an economically, ecologically, and societally safe use of water for all type of water uses, industry, municipalities, and agriculture.
Good. I think we're running out of time. I propose you to switch to the news. Does that make sense to you? And we keep you,
Absolutely.
Thomas, for news.
I will keep it short, but I have great news.
Okay. What's in the news, Björn?
I mean, 3 years ago, I will make it short. 3 years ago, I was doing a study about the semiconductor industry here in Germany, especially in Europe. And the conclusion was, hey, forget it, right? We have number 12, which is somehow Infineon here, which is good. And they do some fabs and they produce something. But let's say the conclusion was if we want to do something, we have to go to China or to the US. And they're the major players in terms of water treatment plants is Ovivo and Suez, right? Especially in the US. But something has happened over the last years due to the supply issue we have, due to the war we have, and all the things that Intel, the number 2 in the world in terms of semiconductor industry, is saying, okay, I would like to invest into new fabs here in Germany, which is not the news, which is a 17 billion project here in Germany, which is huge. I think it's bigger than Tesla. I'm not sure. But anyway, the interesting part is, so far, I mean, or other way around, I said this, that Ovivo and Suez are somehow the players. And Ovivo, we know that it belongs to Skion. And they are a little bit, over the last years, they were a little bit under the radar in terms of Europe. And right now, they are changing that, and they're becoming more and more visible in terms of the semicon industry, because they also hired, just in the last 3 months, 6 people from H&E, the other APCUs in the semicon industry, going to Ovivo. And I'm talking about basic engineering, I'm talking about sales, I'm talking about R&D. All the people are going there because Ovivo is investing into this as well. So this is in news. They are becoming more visible, and now the strategy, we talked about that a year ago, right? It is clear now. So that is in use. So they push really the market, and semicon is coming to Europe.
So you're saying the strategy is clear in case it's not fully clear. And that is funny because I had no clue you were going to put that news in the pipe for today. But tune in today to my podcast, the Don't Wastewater podcast, because tomorrow morning, I'm releasing my interview with Reinhard Hübner, the CEO of Ski on Water, where we're discussing the strategy of Ski on Water, where we're discussing what Ovivo is doing in semiconductor industry. So that's an interesting plug, which you allow me, which makes a good bridge. But I think you might discover that maybe not all of what you predicted is right, or it didn't say that you were right. Maybe you were, but he's not saying that you're right. So you should listen to that interview. I think it's going to be interesting for you. And I'm sorry, Thomas, because again, that German guy next to you is sidetracking the show, but he's doing that all the time. I'm getting used to it. Anyways, it was a pleasure to have you, and it sounds like we have many doors open, which would make for cool sequels. So maybe we should think of a sequel where we go into those doors which we opened today. I'm really sorry I couldn't join you. I think that was my big news, which we had at the opening, which what's in the news for me for that month. I guess that was it. And for all the ones which were with us today, well, thanks a lot. Do you have a closing word?
Thanks a lot, Thomas. Thanks a lot, really, that we could host, that we could be here, that you are hosting our show, and that you was part of the show. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to you, Antoine. All the best to your wife and to the baby, right? And to the audience. We see us very soon.
Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.